Welcome, friend. I'm Jack, host of the channel, and today we're diving into another episode. Pour yourself a drink and get comfortable, because I've got a powerful story coming your way. If something hits deep, drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's get into it.
Tom Hill sat outside his wife's office at 8 p.m. because today was the day he planned to end the sham of a marriage he and his wife called a relationship. Some husbands don't notice the signs over time, but Tom did. He noticed it and was ready to end it. Tom estimated that this had been going on for about 5 months. It was then that he first noticed his wife Sarah wearing red high-heeled shoes to work. She hated wearing heels. The only times she tolerated them were for weddings, special occasions, and in the bedroom on certain occasions. Sarah wore red heels and black stockings with a lacy bra and thong. Tom loved seeing her in heels and thought they had a wonderful love life, but she never wore them to work. He asked her about it. "Why are you wearing heels, honey? Is something happening today?" he asked. "I have a meeting with my boss. I just want to look professional," she replied without looking back. Tom thought, maybe like a professional streetwalker, but remained silent. Over time, her late nights became more frequent, 2 to 3 hours, several days a week. Once the girls' nights out started, he realized what was really going on. She hated clubs, salons, and bars. Her idea of going out was dinner or coffee. She didn't drink a drop and looked down on those who did. He followed her to her third girls' night out, and she went to a house in Riverton. He knew this house. He had been there several times for parties. It was the home of her boss, David Stone. Tom waited an hour, and when he was sure this was her plan and not just a stop along the way, he let the air out of all 4 of her tires and drove home. She didn't mention the tires when she got home that night or over the weekend, but he heard her tell their son, Mark, "Would you believe someone let the air out of my tires last night?" "No way, Mom, is this true?" Mark asked. "Yeah, thank God they didn't cut 'em. They just released the air. I was able to use that air pump thing your dad makes me keep in the trunk." "Wow, where have you been?" "Just at a dance club with my friends." "You should probably avoid this in the future," Mark said. Sarah grinned and said, "Sure, baby." Tom met with a lawyer and began the divorce process. That's why he was sitting in the car not far from her office. She was supposed to be served that same evening. He lamented his 15 years of marriage, but overall, they had been good. They produced his 13-year-old son, Mark, who was the apple of his eye and a daddy's boy. He met Sarah when he needed a lawyer for a contract dispute with his employer. She was then a receptionist who wanted to become a paralegal. He thought she was great and asked her out. They dated happily for 3 years before he proposed, and he thought they were happy throughout their marriage, right up until she started working for David Stone. He drove a truck and had long hours at times, but they spent as much time together as possible. The whole family went on trips as Mark's schedule allowed. He always had either sports or some other time-consuming activity. Tom and Sarah sometimes traveled to Lake Tahoe, California, to visit wineries or to Reno to shop and relax without Mark when he was old enough. The shock of Sarah's betrayal cut him deeply. She became more and more distant from him, but he never suspected that she was cheating until he noticed the heels. From there, it was all downhill. Her attitude was bad and getting worse. He remembered the conversation the night he followed her. "Darling, why don't we have dinner and go to the movies today? I have a rare day off on Wednesday, and I want to spend some time with you," he said. "You know that now I meet the girls on Wednesdays. They rely on me to be their designated driver. Let them get by for one night. With the extra hours you work and those nights you spend with the girls, I barely see you." "Well, if you had a real job that didn't force you to drive at all hours of the day and night, you could see me more often. But you don't, and I had to suffer through it for a decade. Deal with it. See you later." She didn't even say goodbye when she walked out the door. He was speechless. He followed her into the garage and watched her drive out. He grabbed the keys and hurried after her. There was only one exit from their area, and to get to the exit from their house, you had to go through a whole maze of streets. He was able to catch up with her as she turned onto Lincoln Street and followed her to David's house. He avoided her for the rest of that weekend and decided to find a lawyer on Monday. He wasn't about to go scorched earth. He just wanted their marriage to end peacefully. He felt, through her words and actions, that she didn't want him anymore, so why hold on to the slippery rope? She could have her boss without a fight on his part. That's how he felt. He told his son about it that Monday. "She's cheating on me, buddy. You may not have noticed a difference in the last couple of months, but I do. She has sex with her boss." "No way, Dad, I don't believe it. I followed her to his house. She said she was going out with friends, but that's not true. She went straight to her boss's house. But her tires were ruined at the club." "No, son, I did it, and I did it outside her boyfriend's house, when I saw that she wasn't going to the club." "I just can't believe it, Dad." "Me too, but it's true." His son sat next to him in the car, waiting for the fireworks to inevitably start. "Are you really sure, Dad? No chance?" "No, son. Everything is over. She broke my trust and tore out my heart. I cannot tolerate such betrayal." "What if she felt like she had a reason to do it?" "Buddy, there is no reason to justify a long affair. What if she got drunk and it was just one time? Maybe if she had been raped, of course, it would be different." "No, she chose this path. She betrayed my trust. Trust is the most important thing you can have with someone. You can never love someone you can't trust. I could never love someone who betrayed me like that. Our marriage fell apart." Mark looked out the window and saw two men approaching the car. "What an idiot," Sarah Hill said, looking out the window of her law office, having sex with David, glad that their office had good old tinted windows on one side. "I can't believe it. He thought he'd get to me first." There was no lovemaking there. It was bestial in every way. It took David 7 months to attract Sarah, and he was grooming her to replace his wife, who had just received a final divorce decree ending their 17-year marriage. He was tired of his ex-wife's whining and moaning about everything. He was tired of her weight gain. He was tired of her lack of sexual desire. He was embarrassed to be seen with her, and when his twins left for college, he broke free. Sarah was the same age as his wife, but more elegant. She had the toned body of a 30-year-old and was amazingly beautiful. David had already improved her wardrobe, and she was going to be a great boss's wife. A knock on the window made Tom jump. "Are you Thomas Hill?" Rolling down the window, he said, "Yes. You've been served. Please read the documents carefully. There is a restraining order that requires you to stay 100 yards away from Sarah Hill, Mark Hill, and your family residence." "What? An injunction from Mark?" Mark snatched the envelope from his hands and read the headline about the divorce. She found a restraining order and handed it to him. "What the hell?" he shouted. "Oh God, no," Mark moaned. "Dad, I swear I didn't know." "What are you talking about?" She handed him the rest of the papers. The documentation laid out several allegations: spousal violence, child abuse, sexual abuse of a minor. "Mark, why?" "Dad, I swear I had nothing to do with this. This is a lie or a mistake." "Wait, how did she know I'd be here right now?" "That's because I told her," his daughter said. These words broke his heart. "When you told me she was cheating on you, I came face to face with her. She told me she only did it because she had an investigator's report that said you cheated on her." "You can't be serious. Have you seen the report?" Tom asked. "No. You believed her and not me? Did you let her set me up? Buddy, why? I love you so much. Why did you do this to me? I asked you not to say anything." "I swear, Dad, I didn't know about the restraining order. This abuse is crap. I swear I didn't say anything like that to anyone," Mark cried quietly, not paying attention to her pleas. A moment later, Tom said, "You have to leave now, Mark. I can't and don't want to be within 100 yards of you anymore," he said quietly. "Dad, no," she screamed. "Go, or I might get arrested on top of all this. The sheriff is still here watching me." Reading further, Tom said, "Oh my God, they also froze all my accounts. Crap, what should I do now? Congratulations to you both. You destroyed me. I can't even afford to fight her powerful law firm with all these bogus claims. I will forever fight in court. Oh God, no." "I'll fix everything, Dad," Mark said, getting out of the car and heading toward the office building. Inside the office, David and Sarah finished and sighed contentedly. "It was great, darling," Sarah said. "I just wish I had binoculars so I could see his face." David was just fastening his belt and Sarah was smoothing out her dress when Mark ran into the office, screaming, "You're a liar. Child abuse, sexual violence. What is wrong with you?" Sarah smirked. "I had to strike first. Now he cannot enter the house or access our money for some time. I have the upper hand over him." He didn't do it. I don't know this for sure. You guys are really close, Sarah said with a grin. Mark approached her and asked, "He didn't cheat, did he?" "Of course not. Who needs it?" she said with a laugh. "You're a monster," Mark said, and punched his mother in the face with all his might. Sarah collapsed to the ground in shock and pain. David laughed and said, "Nice shot, kid." Mark froze, then looked around. He saw bookcases, shelves, and a dirty desk. He grimaced in disgust, looked at David, and swept everything off the table. Then Mark looked at him and calmly said, "You'd better never cross paths with me again, idiot," and he left. "Mark, wait, damn it!" Sarah screamed after him. David said, "That little brat will pay for this." On her way out, Mark passed a man with an envelope in his hand who asked her, "Are you Sarah Hill?" "There she is," she said, pointing back to the office as she rushed away. Both Sarah and David laughed at the fact that she was served with Tom's divorce petition. Mark desperately tried to help her dad. She found a copy of her mother's divorce papers and saw that the lawyer worked in her mother's office, so it was impossible to go to him. She called Grandpa George. George was Tom's father, and she hoped he could help. "What do you need, young lady?" he asked. "Grandfather, we must help Dad. I don't know who to turn to for help. He doesn't answer my calls." "I can't believe what you did to your father, Mark. What were you thinking while helping your mother?" "Grandfather, this is all a lie. I didn't do anything. It's all my mom and her idiot lawyer guy." "Watch your tongue, girl." "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I swear I didn't blame him for any of this, and I had no idea that when I confronted her, she would explode like that." "Fine, I'll see what I can do." "Grandfather, is he there? Can I talk to him?" "He cannot have any contact with you until this order is lifted. Every time you call him, he starts crying because of what happened. He's afraid your mother will find out he talked to you and turn him into the police. His lawyer said a court date has been set for a hearing in the case, but nothing can be done until then." Mark, crying bitter tears, said, "Grandpa, tell him that I love him and miss him. If I see him, I will do it." Mark hung up and cried for several minutes. When she finally calmed down, she went into her mother's room, started taking her underwear out of her drawers and her new clothes out of her closet, and threw them down the stairs. She picked up a large pile of clothes, carried them out the front door, and threw them in the middle of the lawn. She laughed when she saw that some of the outfits were so new that they still had tags on them. "Screw you, Mom," she said out loud and went into the barn to get lighter fluid. She poured the entire can onto her clothes and used matches to light it. She noticed that the time was getting closer to when her mother would return home. Mark smiled as an idea came to her mind. Pulling into the driveway, Sarah saw Mark sitting on a lawn chair in the front yard roasting marshmallows over a pile of her burning clothes. She screamed and ran out of the car, screaming at Mark, "What the hell are you doing? Have you gone crazy?" "No, Mom. I'm completely out of my mind. I decided to make you pay for the fact that my dad can't talk to me. Every day that passes until I talk to him, I'm going to destroy a few more of your things. You better retract this crap abuse claim ASAP, or more of your stuff will go up in flames. And if you touch me, I will report your abuse to the authorities and also tell them that your boyfriend asked me to show him my panties." Sarah gasped and stammered, "Mark, a court date has been set for Monday. The restraining order will not be renewed. It was only for a short time." "Don't worry, Mom. Until I talk to him, things will turn into smoke." "Crap!" Sarah shouted, entering the house. She called Tom, but of course, he didn't answer and deleted the message without listening to it. Moments later, a fire truck and a police car arrived. One of the neighbors had reported the fire. A policeman and one of the firefighters approached Mark. "What does all this mean, young lady?" asked the officer. "My mother wanted to get rid of the clothes she had grown out of. She told me to burn them," Mark said. "You can't light a fire in the front yard. Is your mother home?" he asked. "Yes, sir. I'll put it out with a hose if you want." The fireman spoke and asked, "Did you use anything to light it, or did you just set the clothes on fire?" "A whole can of lighter fluid," she said proudly. "There's no water. We have some sand. I'll fill it up," the fireman said. While the fireman was dealing with the fire, the policeman rang the doorbell. Sarah opened the door, ready to attack her daughter, but realized it was the police. "We'll put out the fire. It's no big deal, officer," Sarah said before he could speak. "The firefighters are doing it now, ma'am." Did you know it's against city ordinance to have an uncontrolled fire in your yard? No, I didn't know, she said through clenched teeth. Here's your fine. You just need to pay. No court appearance is required. Next time, ma'am, just give your unwanted clothes to Goodwill. Less fortunate people could use them. She closed the door. Sarah's lawyer appeared before a judge for a restraining order hearing the next Monday. He did not attempt to renew it, knowing that it was received falsely. It served its purpose, bought time, and ruined Tom's reputation. Tom's lawyer filed a motion to charge Sarah with perjury. The judge said without conclusive evidence that the order was filed under false pretenses, there was no perjury. You may be opening this can of worms in your divorce counterclaim, but you know there is no prospect of a claim. The fact that the restraining order was lifted was of little comfort to Tom, who was in a terrible state of depression. His life was falling apart because he couldn't cope with the false accusations, frozen assets, his wife's betrayal, and what he felt was the worst part of it all, his daughter's betrayal. He barely made ends meet. He took time off from work, drank too much, and was miserable. He went to his house in the afternoon when he knew Sarah and Mark wouldn't be there. He discovered that she had changed the locks, but tried opening the garage door, and it worked. He found all his things in the garage. There were several boxes, and his clothes were in garbage bags. He noticed that she left him the wedding album and all the photographs of the happy family that used to be hung throughout the house. He kept in touch with his parents and brother, but the relationship was strained due to his problems. His parents begged him to see a psychiatrist, but he refused. He felt like he didn't need a psychiatrist to tell him his life sucked, and there was nothing he could do about it. Sarah's law firm waged a campaign of war without mercy. They even told his employer about the restraining order and abuse allegations, and Tom was fired for that reason. There was a moral clause in his contract. If he had been in a better state of mind, he would have known that he could fight this and most likely win. But at that moment, he simply could not do anything. Nobody knew where Tom lived. He communicated with his family only by telephone. The only time anyone saw him was when he had a mandatory court appearance for his divorce, and he refused to talk to anyone other than his lawyer and the judge. Mark tried to talk to him on such occasions and cried every time he passed her without looking at her. She thought he looked like the Walking Dead. Sarah was happy with how things were going. She began to resent Tom months before when David turned her against him, and over the course of her seduction, she almost came to hate Tom. After months of legal wrangling, the divorce was declared final. Tom got his share of the assets back. His lawyer was able to get the house sold and he kept his truck. He couldn't find a job because of false rumors circulating around town that he was abusing his daughter. No one cared that he was not accused of anything. He decided to move to Houston, where he found work in his field as a truck driver. He put all his belongings in the back of the pickup and was saying goodbye to his parents when Mark pulled up. "Dad, I'm so sorry. None of this should have happened," she said, running up to hug him. He cried and didn't hug her back. "You chose your mother over me without any evidence. Because you went to her, the first domino fell. I am a simple driver, and I had to have the element of surprise in front of the law firm where she works. I had to file first so she couldn't retaliate. Now you understand why." "Daddy, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'm leaving now. This false accusation of child molestation just won't go away. Once you're accused of something like that, it's a stink you just can't wash off. Someday your mother and her lover will pay for this. Goodbye, Mark. I loved you more than my own life. I did everything I could to give you a good life. I just hope you don't grow up like your mother." She burst into tears as her grandmother hugged her. This gave him the opportunity to get into the truck and drive away. "Sarah, will you marry me?" David asked the day the divorce was finalized. "David!" She began to cry and jumped up to hug him, causing a small scene in the restaurant. "Let's go to your house and celebrate," she said when he paid the bill. She loved his big house and couldn't wait to move in and remodel it. When she got rid of the tacky furniture and curtains that his ex-wife had chosen, it was imperative that their bedroom set should be the first thing to buy. David laughed as they walked out and saw his ex-wife having dinner with her parents. His ex-wife, Carol, was disgusted with him and his latest mistress. She spat at him as they passed by, and he didn't even pay attention to it. Tom walked into the truck warehouse and saw his colleague Lou standing in the doorway. "Tom, what's the matter, dude? You look like someone ruined your oatmeal." "Divorce today, final." "Ah, well, after what she did to you, you should have some fun today." "It's not her. It's my daughter. She took that side, and I just can't deal with it. She calls me and emails me, but I just can't bring myself to talk to her. Maybe I should see a psychiatrist." "Maybe you should let off some steam," a voice said from behind them. "Hello, Mariana. That's not a bad idea," Lou said. "Ha, who needs my dried-out old ass?" said Tom. Mariana leaned over and whispered, "I do," and ran her tongue along his earlobe. She walked away, and the men shook their heads at her as she walked away from them. "Go for it, Tom. She's a wonderful girl." "What the hell? Why not?" Tom answered. "This is my girlfriend now. Let's hit the road." On their first date, Tom took Mariana to dinner and a movie. After the film, they went to a diner for coffee and cake. "Tom, you need to keep your chin up. You're a good guy who's down on his luck. Everything will work out in the end," she said. "Maybe, Mariana. For a long time I could not understand what I did wrong. I didn't understand why she attacked me so much during the divorce. For heaven's sake, it's terrible. But it's all over now," she said, grabbing his hand. "Look forward, not behind. I'll make it worth your time." He smiled and squeezed her hand. "Let's get out of here, shall we?" Mariana pulled Tom in for a kiss as she opened the front door. "Do you want to look at my bedroom?" "I wish I could." She took his hand and led him to her bedroom. Moonlight streamed through the window, giving the room a soothing bluish tint. They kissed, intertwining their tongues and slowly undressing each other. There was nothing crazy about it. They were going to enjoy every moment. She lay down on the bed, and he knelt on the floor. "Well, her loss is my gain, and I plan to take advantage of that advantage often," he kissed her and said. "Anytime, dear. Anytime." A week later, a man dressed all in black crept up to the back door of a large house in an upscale part of town. Prepared to break in, he smiled when he found the door unlocked. Slowly making his way through the house, hoping the floorboards wouldn't creak, he found the room he was looking for. It was perfectly equipped for what he needed, and he knew it because of the Facebook photo of his target sitting at his desk. This arrogant man had the photo as his screensaver. The closet was behind and to the right of the desk, and the room was dimly lit, only by a desk lamp. The closet door was closed, but the intruder could still see the room fairly well. He opened the door behind the counter and waited. The only concern was if the target approached the closet before sitting down at the table, it would complicate things, but the job would still get done, and his perfect alibi would keep him safe. David Stone walked into his home office and looked at the computer monitor that sat at an angle on his desk. His back was completely turned toward the cabinet behind him. The intruder slowly opened the closet door and carefully slipped out. David heard the noise and looked up. The gun was pressed to his head, and the trigger was pulled. The pistol was placed in his hand, and a note was left on the table. The shooter quickly walked out the door. The note simply read, "Price paid in full." Sarah returned home from the store and walked into David's office to show him the new bedding she had bought. She screamed when she saw his body limp in the chair. She took her cell phone out of her purse, called 911, and reported the shooting. She looked at him and saw the gun in his hand and the note on the table. She didn't touch it, but read what it said. She whispered to herself, "No, Tom, no," and screamed, "What have you done?" Detective Chris Jordan received the call and headed to the Stones' home. When he arrived, he saw a woman crying in the living room and crime scene investigators moving in and out of the office. He scanned the scene, looking at the new set of golf clubs in the corner of the room. Good clubs, expensive ones, he thought, continuing to look around. He examined the body and saw the gun still clutched in the victim's right hand. He asked one of the officers who had arrived first, "What do we have so far?" "An apparent suicide. Shot himself in the head. Victim, lawyer David Stone, the homeowner. The wife is Sarah Hill. She found the body and called 911. "Is there a note?" "Yes, sir. It's typed on a computer. No signature, just one sentence." He handed Detective Jordan a plastic bag with the note inside. The detective frowned and asked, "Is the wife that blonde?" Yes, sir. Detective Jordan approached Sarah, still sobbing in the living room. Ma'am, do you have any idea what this note means? Sarah looked up, her voice trembling. That means it wasn't suicide. My ex-husband killed him. David hated guns. He didn't own one like that. Why do you think your ex-husband did this? Because he felt David took me away from him. Did he? Did you date the deceased while you were married? Sarah's eyes lowered in embarrassment. Yes. Could there have been anyone else who might have wanted him dead? He was a lawyer, right? I think his ex-wife was very angry about being left. He practiced corporate law, civil clients, almost never in a courtroom. Okay, ma'am, where were you this evening? Shopping. She paused and then added defensively, You don't think I did it, do you? I don't even know if it was suicide. Could you give me the receipts for your purchases, please? Okay, she nodded, wiping her eyes. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, Detective Jordan visited Tom Hill. Mr. Hill, I'm Detective Jordan. I need to ask you a few questions, please. Of course, Detective. How are you? Tom said, gesturing for him to come in. Where were you last night around 8 p.m.? At work, I was driving a rig through Springfield. I arrived at the station at 9:30. You can check the logs. Where did you come from? Peoria. What happened? David Stone was shot dead last night in an apparent suicide. Apparent. Let's just say there are some inconsistencies. Fine. Well, I couldn't have done it from Peoria. No, sir. If I have any more questions, I'd like to call if that's okay. Of course. I'll give you my new mobile number. Detective Jordan left, dissatisfied. As he drove back across town to check Tom's alibi at the truck station, his mind turned over the details. Why would a left-handed person shoot himself with his right hand? Why type the note? Why were there so few gunshot marks on his hand? Something wasn't right. Later that day, Tom sat down at his kitchen table. What does this all mean? He muttered to himself when Lou entered. What's going on, Tom? Tom laughed and shook his head. Would you believe my ex-wife's fiancé committed suicide? No way. Yeah, let's just hope my alibi checks out. They laughed and clinked beer bottles together in a toast. Sarah sat in the front row at the funeral, mourning the man who so easily took her away from her husband. Tears flowed for the man who convinced her to go nuclear and destroy a good man so that she could change. She was madly in love with Tom until she was transferred to work for David. David targeted her, planting seeds of doubt about her truck-driving husband. Comments about truckers, the long hours, and flippant remarks when Tom was on the road. It was all too easy for David. He planted the idea that Tom was neglecting her, and it grew inside her like a poison. She couldn't decide whether she was crying because of the loss of David or because of the loss of her husband and her son. It was all such a waste. She didn't hear the whispers from David's ex-wife and daughters, who glared at her throughout the service, blaming her for his death. At home for the weekend from college, Mark was approached by Sarah. You could come to the funeral and pay your respects, she said softly. Mark looked at her, disgusted. How dare you tell me to respect the man who destroyed my father? Screw you. I shouldn't even call that piece of crap a man. He slammed the door as he left the house and took the long drive back to college. Detective Jordan sat in a meeting with his boss, discussing the lack of progress in the case. All the suspects' alibis have been verified. Tom Hill's truck tracker shows he made no stops on his way from Peoria to Houston, and the timing of the trip was correct. The warehouse team identified him as the driver. Sarah Hill's receipts and surveillance cameras place her at Macy's, Victoria's Secret, and Starbucks during the window of the time of death. Stone's ex-wife and daughters had dinner with her parents, her brother, and sister-in-law to celebrate her birthday. Jordan explained. Was it her birthday? The commander asked. No, they were just celebrating it early. Heck, I even checked on Hill's son. He was at college over 3 hours away in California. There's no chance this was suicide? The commander asked. It's possible, but it doesn't feel right to me, Jordan replied. Well, with no suspects, no motive, and no concrete evidence that it was a murder, let's close it as a suicide. Jordan nodded, upset as he left the room. 6 months later, Sarah invited Jason Brown to dinner. It was their third date, and by the end of the night, Sarah got him into bed. After a passionate night, Jason went home. He opened a bottle of beer before going to bed, sat down to check his email, and as he sat at the kitchen table, a gun was pointed at his head and the trigger was pulled. A pistol was placed in his hand, and a note was left on the table. The price had been paid again. Detective Jordan walked through the apartment and into the kitchen. Before he could speak, one of the officers handed him a suicide note. "Damn it, looks like I was right about something else. Now I just need to find out who the hell did this," he said to the officer. "Any fingerprints?" Jordan asked the technician. "Yes, but if I had to guess right now, I would say they're the victims." "Are there any witnesses?" "Who called the police?" Jordan asked. "A neighbor heard the shot and called 911. No one saw anyone enter or leave." "Of course not. How did they get in here? No broken locks or windows?" Jordan asked, looking around. "The balcony," the technician said, pointing. "The sliding door wasn't locked. The victim probably wasn't worried since it's on the second floor, but someone of average height could have easily climbed up." Jordan frowned. "Average height for a man or a woman?" "Average man or a tall woman," the technician replied. Jordan asked for the victim's phone. The last call on his phone was to Sarah Hill. Detective Jordan sighed. Not her again. Sarah sat in Detective Jordan's office the next day. "Miss Hill, why do your lovers keep committing suicide?" Jordan asked pointedly. "It must be Tom. He's the one punishing me." "Where were you last night?" "At home all night. I have an alarm system that will confirm this," Sarah said through tears. "Tell me about the alarm system. When it's on, it detects any doors or windows being opened. I turned it on when Jason left last night and turned it off this morning when you arrived." "Did you turn it off at any time during the night?" "No, Mark's at college, so it was on all night," she insisted. "All right, it's easy enough to check. So your theory is that your ex-husband is behind these suicides?" "Yes, who else could it be?" "When was the last time you spoke to him?" "Not since the divorce." "Did you see him following you, or did he try to contact you?" "No, so how could he know your last lover?" "I don't know, but it must be him." "Fine, that's all for now. Stay close, though," Jordan said, preparing to leave. "Oh, one more thing. How tall are you?" "About 5'9" or 5'10". "Why do you need that?" she asked, confused. "Just curious," Jordan replied with a slight grin. "Once again, my condolences." The case seemed closed, but Detective Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He was determined to figure out who was behind these deaths and whether they were really suicides. Tom and Mariana were cozy on the couch, watching Jack Ryan on Prime when the doorbell rang. "Detective Jordan, what can I do for you today?" Tom asked, gesturing for him to come in. "Sir, where were you last night at 1:30 a.m.? "On the way back from Detroit. I arrived at 2:30. "What happened this time?" "Do you know Jason Brown?" "No, why?" "He was your ex-wife's boyfriend. Looks like he shot himself last night." "No way, looks like it, huh? Maybe she's a serial killer, a black widow or something," Tom said sarcastically. "Maybe. Thank you. If I need anything else, I'll be in touch," Jordan replied, leaving the house. "What was all that about, baby?" Mariana asked, looking concerned. "It looks like another one of my ex-wife's boyfriends is dead." "Oh God," she gasped, raising her hand to her mouth. "Yeah, thank God I have an alibi. I hope whoever's killing these guys keeps picking times when I'm on the road." Tom's phone buzzed. He looked at it and saw it was Mark calling, but he ignored it. Mariana frowned. "Will you never talk to her again?" "I don't understand why you keep asking me this," Tom said, a little annoyed. "She misses you," Mariana said softly. Tom looked away and muttered, "She made her choice." Tom's cell phone rang again as Mariana looked at him with concern. He sighed but refused to pick it up. "She misses you, Tom. Don't you want to talk to her?" Mariana asked. "No. She made her choice. She chose her mother over me when it counted. I was right about Sarah, but she didn't believe me. That decision cost me everything, and it nearly ruined my life. I needed her on my side, but she opened the door for her mother to take it all away. Now she regrets it, but it's too late," Tom said, pain lining his voice. "But Tom, she's your daughter," Mariana pressed gently. Tom shook his head, his voice hardening. "She made her choice. We all have to live with it now." 5 years later, Sarah and Mark sat in the front row of the funeral home's memorial room. The large turnout was for Tom Hill's wake and funeral procession. Tom had died of pancreatic cancer just 4 weeks after walking Mark down the aisle at her wedding. He had managed to find some peace in his final months, thanks to a tearful reconciliation with his daughter. Mark rescheduled her wedding day to accommodate Tom's failing health, costing her a fortune due to urgent fees. But she didn't care. She got what she wanted most, Her dad gave her away at her wedding. Their reunion, though bittersweet, brought him a final sense of peace. As she stood by his casket, her mind swam with the stories shared during the wake, stories about the life her father led after the divorce, stories she had never known. Mariana had been there throughout, telling Mark how much Tom had missed her over the years. She explained how he had thrown away letters, deleted emails, and ignored phone calls until the terminal diagnosis had softened him. In his final moments, Tom had thanked Mariana for bringing Mark back to him and apologized for never marrying her, even though they had been happy together for years. Mark finally understood how much her father had loved her and how much time they had lost because of the choices they had made. She promised herself she wouldn't let that kind of pain continue into the next generation. Sarah, still estranged from her daughter, tried to reconnect throughout the wake and funeral, but she ruined everything with the wrong comment at the wrong time. After everyone had left, Sarah and Mark sat alone at a table. "Mark, I finally found peace," Sarah said, her voice breaking the silence. Mark looked at her with a sharp glare. "What are you talking about, Mom?" "I haven't been able to have a relationship for years out of fear that your father would kill them," Sarah said, matter-of-factly. Mark's eyes widened in shock and fury. "You worthless piece of crap. He was acquitted by the police, and now you're glad he's dead so you can have fun again?" "Mark, you don't understand." "No, I don't. The next time I see you will be when we put your fat ass in the ground," Mark spat, cutting her off. "Mark, please. Goodbye, Mom. Good luck with your sex life." Mark stormed out, leaving Sarah alone at the table, her heart breaking again. 10 months later, Sarah was having dinner with her boyfriend, Charlie Heron, at an expensive steakhouse. It was their 8th month together, and she finally felt like she had found some happiness. "Sarah," Charlie said, becoming serious, "these last few months have been so wonderful for me." He squeezed her hand. "For me too, Charlie. I wasn't sure I'd ever love again," Sarah replied with a smile. Charlie took a deep breath. "Sarah, I love you. Will you marry me?" Sarah's eyes widened, and she took a moment before saying, "Yes, yes, I will marry you." In that moment, Sarah thought to herself, "He's dead. I have nothing to worry about now." A week later, Charlie sat on his back porch, thinking about the upcoming wedding and Sarah moving in with him. He took a deep drag from his Cuban cigar, exhaled, and sighed contentedly. Suddenly, a gun was pressed to his temple, and the trigger was pulled. A pistol was placed in his hand, a cigar in the ashtray, and a note under the heavy ashtray on the table. The note read, "The price has been paid in full." Sarah received a phone call from Detective Jordan, her face wet with tears after the conversation. She knew what was coming. She went to the bathroom, took out a bottle of sleeping pills she hadn't touched in years, and walked over to the mailbox. She placed an envelope inside, raised the flag, and then returned to her bed. She thought about her wedding to Tom, how beautiful the day had been, and about Mark, how proud she was of her daughter. As Sarah lay down, she prayed she would see Tom soon. Placing the note on her chest, she closed her eyes for the last time. Her final note read, "My price has been paid in full." Mark arrived home from work that evening, carrying the mail and a bag of groceries. She kicked off her shoes and poured herself a glass of wine. Looking through the mail, she gasped when she saw the return address. Sarah Hill. Tearing it open, she read the last message from her mother, her heart sinking. Sarah's final note, "My dear Mark, I give you this last gift of repentance. Whether you believe it or not, I love you with all my heart, and I am sorry for all the pain I caused you. It was never intentional, but hurting you and your father was the worst thing I've ever done. I knew it had to be you when Charlie was killed. I'm sorry that I made you punish me in this way. I hope that you can now live without the pain of my betrayal. Destroy this page and give the second page to the police. Page 2 is my confession. I take full responsibility for everything, my betrayal of you, your father, and the lives I've destroyed. There have been so many deaths because of me, and it must stop. Maybe this will make up for your guilt, and you can finally forgive me and find peace. Please tell your future children about the good times, not about how I ruined our family. I hope you have a long, happy marriage. Never let anyone take you away from them. I love you, Mark. Mother." Mark burned the first page in the fireplace, watching it turn to ash. She kept the second page, knowing it would go to the police. Mark walked into Detective Jordan's office the next day, handed him the letter, and sat down. After reading it, Jordan shook his head in disbelief. "Lord Mark, forgive me for suspecting you. It's hard to believe, but it all makes sense now," Mark said quietly. "She must have been crazy for years." "In a way, it does make sense. There were always some things we couldn't pin on anyone, but there just wasn't enough evidence." "Well, I'm glad it's over now," Mark said. "No more deaths, no more pain." "You take care, Mark," Detective Jordan said as he stood to leave. "You too, Detective," Mark replied, walking out of the police station with a smile. As she opened the car door, Mark looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Mom. I hope you found Dad."
Thanks for hanging out with me on today's episode, brother. I'm Jack, host of this podcast, and it's great having you here. If today's story hit home, send it on to a buddy who might need it. Remember, we're all in this together, turning life's curvy balls into wins. If you have an opinion or story to share, then drop a line in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. Until next time, keep your chin up and keep pushing forward. Stay strong, folks.